Welcome to another episode of Smithereens. I'm your co-host, Tom Burtles.
This is your co-host, Jared.
And on today's episode, we are talking about presentable versus perfection. Jared, who do we have on the podcast today?
We have a newcomer to the podcast, Caleb Hausneck, our digital marketing manager. We also have Ryan Delmar, our photographer and videographer. We're going to be touching on things about what does perfection mean to you when it comes to your work? Do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
We talk about how pride influences perfection and when we know to walk away from a project.
Yeah, so please sit back and enjoy this perfectly recorded podcast. I make 100% a shot to take.
Great.
Michael Scott.
Wayne Gretzky.
All right.
So you'd say all those shots are perfect.
Michael Scott. Perfect. Never miss a
Is
shot.
every shot perfect?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing but that. No backboard.
Wow. That's impressive. All right. To pivot, perfectionism. Now, Ryan and Caleb, would you guys call yourselves perfectionists? It doesn't have to be maybe necessarily about what we do here, but in general, have you ever claimed that as your as a part of you?
Absolutely not.
No?
No. I would never
Absolutely.
claim myself to be a perfectionist. Caleb's a little bit more type A than I am, I would say.
So
Maybe
Caleb,
he would say he's more of a perfectionist, but I would definitely not label myself that at
you
all.
would? Okay.
I would say it, and I know that others say it about me.
Okay.
Right? So, yeah, absolutely.
To a fault?
To a fault.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we got both sides of the coin for this conversation.
I'm definitely not.
You're not a perfectionist?
God, no.
It's actually part of the reason that you and I get along so well, I think, Dummer, as friends.
Because we balance.
Really?
You got the perfection side. I have the, like, a little bit more loose and free.
I think so, yeah.
So, Caleb, for you, what about you makes you a perfectionist? Like, what would you qualify that as?
I just have a very close attention to detail,
Okay.
regardless of what I'm working on or reviewing on. Or reviewing. And sometimes it's not necessary, right? So that's where the fault comes in.
Sure.
Sometimes my perfectionism gets in the way of my time management.
Interesting. Okay. But you have that, like, sorry. Mark.
Go ahead.
But you have that, like, you know that of yourself kind of already?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm constantly aware of it and like monitoring it.
Sure.
And, in a professional sense, I work with my superiors on it, right?
Right.
At the same time, it's a trait that I'm glad I have.
Oh, absolutely. Brings out the best work. I would say that, Caleb, I'm like you, that I also feel usually like I'm a perfectionist, for sure. It's hard to kind of break away, like, and I understand what you're saying about, like, time becomes, like, kind of maybe the factor that you need to consider and what maybe can pull you away from being a perfectionist on things. Delmar, so you put yourself not in that category.
No, and hearing Caleb talk about how he is a perfectionist, I hear a hint in his voice about how it's like a hindrance. Because sometimes I think it's a little bit of a hindrance to be that way. Because I think perfection is impossible, right? Like, it's a fallacy. It's not, you're never going to get something to absolute perfection. You might have a level of which you think is your standard that you want to get to or be above, and that can be called your perfection per se, but trying to get some project, whatever it is that you're working on, to perfection is impossible, right?
You got to look at the medium. I can get something to be perfect in way of there's no grammatical or spelling errors. Sure. That's
Yeah,
perfect.
you have
Right,
metrics.
That's like
binary,
objectively perfect.
Right.
That's
right?
true, but under those, like, qualifications. So you're using, like, quantifiable variables for that. But in terms of, like, we're a creative agency.
Sure.
So the hard part becomes the idea of, like, creative being perfect. You know what I mean? I guess I'm kind of curious. Have you ever felt like you've, like, accomplished that fully? Like, taking something to its maximum, like, it being perfect?
Oh man.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I don't. I don't think I have.
Really? Okay.
No. I guess which supports your point.
Right. Like, you haven't hit that yet.
No, but I'm always striving for it for
Right.
myself and anyone else that works with me.
Right. So is it, in a sense, then an unattainable goal?
Sure, but it's one that's worth
Fighting for?
because it only makes me better.
Sure.
I see what you're saying about it being a hindrance. I very much admit that.
Yeah. In what way would you say it's like a hindrance? Like, do you have any specific examples of like where you've tried too long at something maybe?
Yeah, so I could spend maybe a couple hours reviewing copy for something, which is important. I'm reviewing, say, like a piece that's going to go out for a client, right? But does it really matter if they use the Oxford comma in one spot and not in the other? I think it does, right?
Sure.
But that's a very small difference, and I have other important tasks to complete.
Sure.
We have several clients, right? So to
Right.
take 2 hours on something like that, that's a lot of time.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
I'm just amazed by like, there's a lot of things that I do in my daily life where I'm just like, not so much wing it, but to Ryan's point, like I feel like nothing has ever. There's comes a point where everything is as final as it's going to get, and as final as it's going to be. Like
Sure.
whether you're creating something, whether it's a work of art or a song, some ad. It's always like you submit it, you're done with it, but you're always looking at it as like, oh, I wish I could have went back and did this. I wish I could have done that. So like, it just depends what it is. Like even the things that whether we write or Caleb, you copy edit or whatever the case may be. If I gave it to you again a year later, it's always something you're always like, oh, I wish I would have done that instead of doing
A year later.
Yeah.
But if I weren't a perfectionist, a year later, would I be that much better that I would notice?
Well, that's an interesting point. So to go back to Delmar, so I feel like as people, anyone that creates anything, like when you revisit old work, like there's only two avenues that you have, where you can either like kind of self bastardize it a little bit to be like, oh my god, I would have done this so different, or you can be like, I actually still kind of like this. Mm-hmm. But as someone who doesn't say themselves as being a perfectionist, kind of, and with Caleb's just claim, how do you feel when you go back to like old work?
In my personal opinion, I think if you're not going back and looking at your old work and saying you would do it differently, then you're doing something wrong. Like, you're not learning, you're not growing.
I agree.
You should always be pushing forward for something. And I think that's the reason why I label myself as not a perfectionist, because I think it's so big of a hindrance to getting to the next step and getting to the next thing. Like, you should constantly, that's not to say that I'm not like paying attention to the details or I don't have a personal level of where I want my work to go.
A metric.
A metric, right. But that's in your head. That's what you want to make it. And that's, different for whatever creative avenue that you're going down. So the quantity of work adds to the level of growth. Like, if you're not constantly creating, how are you learning from anything to get better?
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's totally a fair point.
I feel like there's so many variables on trying to be perfect, and especially like I feel like perfection is very much a personality type, and there comes a spot, especially in the agency, where you have to balance your personality dependent on the variables of like, how many hours can I take on this?
Right.
What's the main goal of this piece of content? Is it just going to live internally? Is it going to be, how many people are seeing this? And there's decisions that you have to make about like how to monitor your own time,
Right.
So it's like where like to Caleb's point, you might want to spend 3 hours on something, but the client's not going to pay you to do that, nor do they want you to. So you have to put something together that's good enough for, and that's probably like a bad use of the word, but it's good for like
meets the requirements.
Exactly. Yeah. It's good
Right.
for the variables of like time, cost, whatever.
Right.
So you have to find that balance. And I think that like if you have the personality type of like everything has to be 1000%. And I feel like you're never really going to get anything that you're really happy with out the door. You're never going to
Oh,
be...
for sure.
That's just my opinion.
Without deadlines, I never would.
Yeah.
To your point, yeah. But I have got, like, that's why I have, like, 3 public pieces of writing.
Sure.
And I hate them all.
Oh, that's the other
so
part
don't
of
look
this.
them up. So,
Yeah,
and like, without deadlines at an agency, saying, like, this needs to be done by this day at this time, you're right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to do it. But, like, I'm also keenly aware of success that's created in a quick manner. Let's think about that client presentation that you and I were a part of recently, Jared.
Right.
That was a huge success in our minds, right? If I had been able to, I would have spent hours preparing for that presentation. Instead, we spent 20 minutes and we crushed it.
Right.
Sure. So does that change anything when you kind of have those wins or those moments where you're like, maybe you had a piece of content, let's say, that met the requirement, that maybe you still felt you could massage a little bit more, change a few things. When it strikes big, when the client says this is exactly what we wanted, does that kind of alleviate that at all for you ever, or kind of maybe help you to find that step off point internally for anything going forward?
So I think for me, it's more a matter of like confidence and how that confidence looks, right, to a client, right? So if I appear to be confident in the work, then it's going to be a hit.
True.
But I'm not confident unless I think it's right.
Sure. So, but I guess to go back to the idea of like perfectionism of, never feeling that something's like perfect, but you still feel something is right enough that you can be confident in.
Have
right?
to, dude. Have to.
Yeah.
Like I pick, you guys know this about me. I pick out my outfits before bed every night.
I don't know that about you.
Before I go to bed each night, I pick out my outfit and I run it by my wife. And
Really?
Yeah, I'll be like, what about this? Does this match? Blah, 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 blah. Because like in the morning, I don't want to be in front of the mirror, like throwing off this shirt with, you know what I mean? And being more late to work because
Sure.
I can't find the right outfit.
I look at your outfit now and I go, I can look at your outfit now and I go, how hard was that?
Right, but it wasn't that hard. This was an easy one, man.
Yeah, right.
And it's not a matter of like putting together these awesome outfits. It's a matter of pleasing my brain, which is a perfectionist brain.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm last minute. I'm like,
Well-
oh shit, what do I have clean?
Yeah, I'm a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, Ryan, you're kind of unique in a situation where you do obviously a lot of photo video work, and a lot of the work that you do, it's like, you do it on your own. So it's like, I feel like if you're creative, you're freelancing for clients, but a lot of work that you do is kind of like, it's your own stamp on it. So I feel like artists have more of a thing where like they could just let things fly because that's the way they intended it to be, whether it be like photo, video, any kind of music stuff. And it's like that there's that gray area of where like, an artist can let you take what you want from it and kind of get your own thought behind it. Like I listened to a podcast the other week, and it was like this guy made a 12-song album off of his iPad, and the production of it was not great, but it worked. And he was like, I don't know, I just wanted to do it. People can take what they like from it.
Interesting.
So I feel like when clients are paying you they have this certain level of expectation, but I feel like if you're creating something as far as, video assets or creative assets, you get kind of more, you could put your own spin on it, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's something that, like, as a creative, you're getting hired to do the kind of work that you have put out into the world. There's no, like, greater feeling, right? Than, like, putting something out, people loving it, and hiring you to do it. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But that only fuels the fire, too, because it's like, oh, it's my own personal stamp, and I could take this another step further and getting to that line of just, like, dragging something out, whereas that initial step of just you working on it is enough, right?
Right.
I think I'd like to briefly touch on like these services that are out nowadays too, because I worry that straying too far from my way of thinking. I think it's meet in the middle between Delmar and I, because I don't want to commodify what we do, right? Because somebody can go onto Fiverr.com and get a logo for $5. Is that logo perfect?
No.
Right.
Probably not. Yeah.
But that commodifies our industry, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that's not what you're saying, Delmar. I'm just saying I think that it's a meet in the middle between my level and yours.
Yeah.
So I'm too good and you're too bad.
Well, I think
Agreed.
I think there's still like a lot of collaboration too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, Caleb, you might be on your ledge like we need more time on this, And then it's like you're convincing the rest of the team, like, hey, we can make this X amount better if we spend 1 or an hour and a half more. Like sometimes we say okay, sometimes we say no, this has got to fly. So it just I feel like it's sometimes it's case by case.
Yeah, and you need that push because at the end of the day, that's the thing that's going to create like the next level of work. And at the end of the day, also like what's another hour to put on something to really, if you know that that's going to be the thing that's going to just like, but that's the hard part too. Is because since I'm kind of in that camp with you, Caleb, like I've definitely been there mentally where with stuff here with websites or with music or whatever that I've created, like if I just throw another like hour thinking behind it, and then that hour becomes 2 hours, and then that 2 hours becomes 4 hours, and like you know what I mean? Like there's a balance in between.
Yeah, diminishing returns is a real thing. You know what I mean? So it's like
yes.
it's finding that point in that balance.
Absolutely.
I think watching like Ryan work and like especially like during the editing process, I've been around for like numerous rounds of revisions based on like headshots. It's like, can you change this? Can you change that? Can you do it? So it's like, at what point is it good enough? You know what I mean? Like I've seen a couple headshots of just like it looked completely different, just the amount of editing that the ex client wanted to do, but at some point it's like good enough. It's good. So I guess
right, like I've seen portrait photographers take hours and hours on headshots.
Yeah, on one
setting up the lighting
yeah.
and like maybe editing after the fact and like retouching the skin and sending it out. Like you could go wild with it.
Yeah. Do you have like a normal like checklist in your head, especially like doing headshots? So like I know like pose up, I want to do X, Y, Z. Like
yeah, and that's going back to like doing it enough, right? Like the more you do things, the more you can self-regulate your intellect and say, oh, like I would do it differently this way, or I would do it differently the other way. So you're constantly learning. So I've done enough headshots that like, I'm sure if I look back and saw the first headshot I took for somebody, it would be awful. And I would be like, oh man, I would want to do it like so differently now.
Sure.
And like, and that's with growth too, right? Like you want to always be checking yourself and trying to get better to the next level. And I've gotten to a point now where, I have that mental checklist where I can go off and be like, all right, this is the way to do it. And I can roll through them pretty quickly.
And building that checklist, is that something that like you learned, or was it like a lot of that came from like client revisions where you like the clients influenced the way you do your checklist? So, have you ever delivered something and the client's like, oh, I hate this. And you're like, I'll make a mental note next time not to do that with a future client.
Yes and no. Like, I think it's a balance too, right? Like, oh, like I don't like the way my face looked in this one. Try to go to this. So you try to like, filter those things out before you even send off things to a client.
Sure.
Definitely get the best things to them, but a lot of it's been just like your own like guidance in your head. Like this doesn't look creatively where I want it to be. Mm-hmm. So let's get it to the next level. And how do you do that? And that's either researching, I've learned so much from just like watching YouTube videos about things and trying to get to the next level. And then you take bits and pieces from other places and you bring them into your own kind of creative ethos and you bring those along.
Your repertoire.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like Delmar, Delmar and I used to work together at a previous job, and I remember one time in particular, we really pushed for this print ad. We were going to do something pretty standard, and instead we came up with this idea with a couple other guys to do the shot above of all the ingredients, the knolling shot, right? Is that what it's called? Knolling?
Yeah, it was like a massive top-down shot of like every single type of product that we had in a certain category.
Oh, wow. You were a perfectionist in that moment, dude.
Yeah.
You had those bottles placed
right
exactly as you wanted them.
Right. And that, I mean, if you have that creative vision about something and you want to see it through, then
and it was awesome.
Yeah.
And you have carried that through. That's why I brought it up. You've carried that through, right? That's one of the things you've picked up and carried into your work today, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was like kind of seeing it, like you have the end vision in your head in a certain case and you want to get to it. And not to say like you can't have back and forth. That sounds like really like I'm going to get to this and everyone get the hell out of my way.
Sure. That's kind of how I'm playing it out in my head. To be
Yeah,
perfectly
right.
honest.
Well, there were doubters. Our superiors doubted us on this process. They were like, "This is taking a lot of time." Blah, blah,
Sure,
blah, blah.
sure.
But when they saw the ad, they were like,
This looks great.
"Okay,
Sure.
Yeah.
that was worth it."
Well, it's like what you said, like going the extra mile. When you know that it's just going to take a little bit more time, but would you have settled for if that photo, like the photo came out, whatever, or like you set up, would you have settled for if it wasn't exactly how you had envisioned in your head?
Yeah, I don't know. Probably not.
There we
I
go.
mean, I would ask for that. Yeah, getting
Uh-huh.
to the end point, right? Like,
Oh man.
no, I just got to push it a
Caleb
little extra
gotcha.
harder.
A little
Yeah.
bit.
Shit.
Well, I guess with that kind of idea, when you're shooting photos or maybe more specific like video, and you have to maybe compile something, right? Like edit something at the end of the day, as a deliverable to a client, if you have shots or video that maybe wasn't exactly what you wanted, or maybe wasn't, that you can't redo in that moment, what do you do in those kind of situations?
That's a tough one. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel like I've always gotten to a point where I can, navigate that and kind of figure out a middle ground, right? Like,
Sure. Pull something from a different
yeah,
shot.
right.
or-
Like, you got to get creative about it and try to pull in things from other things. You're not going to be like, because then you're just stepping all over yourself and being like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to buy myself all these extra
Sure.
time to get to something. So you got to, right? It's the middle ground between trying to get something out the door to a client, or just sitting on it forever.
Right.
Are we doing a 1 year on, 1 year off thing? I noticed that Tom and Delmar did that with their.
I started to get a little hot, and I noticed Tom did it, so I did it as well.
I like
can
hearing-
still hear.
I want to be cool. I want to do what the cool guys do.
I like
so.
hearing
follow-
hearing the room. I
just
like
follow
hearing the
me.
mic.
Okay.
Mine was
All right.
purely based on temperature.
I thought I was good
regulation.
because you were still 2 years on, so that's why. I got mine.
follow
Listen,
me.
Caleb,
I'm
whatever
an
feels
expert.
right, man.
Yeah, man.
Whatever
you don't have
feels
to wear
perfect.
You don't have to
Whatever
wear any.
feels
feels
perfect.
right.
You don't have to wear any headphones if you don't like.
All this talking's making me sweaty.
I actually do wear a headphone on.
Yeah.
I feel like if you don't wear any headphones, you're not going to know that you're like sitting all the way back here.
Yeah.
I got a previous point that Caleb brought up earlier that I would like to touch on.
Sure.
Please.
You said you only have 3 things public facing of your work. Why do you think that is?
I'm way curious about this too.
Of your own work, right?
Of your own writing?
He said he had 3 public things, right?
Yeah, public as in they weren't written for any company I worked for.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, is there a Caleb blog out there that we
I'm
don't
not
know
gonna
about?
I'm not gonna tell you about it because I hate the pieces.
Sure.
And
You
one
almost
of
said
them-
it in like a
Was it
way that
about-
you should have more, though.
I should
Like
have more
right.
because I was supporting your point, which was like that my perfectionism hinders the quantity, right? And truthfully, the quality is okay to everyone else. I a couple of these articles were picked up by other people and shared,
Oh, that's cool.
but to me, looking back on them now,
Yeah.
garbage.
Really?
Trash.
Is there-
Trash.
Is there anything
Trash,
that-
Draymond style.
that we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but is there anything that either of you guys can point to and say, like, years later, I'm still super proud of that I came up with that? Either like a slogan or like a, is there, you don't have to name names, but like stuff that I guess you bringing up that shot that you had talked about at your guy's like previous job might fall into that category. Would you say?
Yeah, I'm definitely super proud of that project that we all got to work on. I mean, I would probably do it differently if I were to do it now again, though. But that's
there we
the
go.
point. That's
Right,
the point, right?
exactly.
Like,
Sure.
super proud of that project. That pushed a lot of things forward, and how I would, tackle something in the future. Like, you learn from it.
Yeah, I'm pretty proud. I made, and this is an outlier for me. I'm pretty proud of a podcast I made. Like, I think in 2013 for my mom. Delmar actually helped me with this. He lent me some equipment, and it's not great in way of quality, but like I just taught myself how to do all of it and came up with the idea, and like it was the best gift I could ever have given
awesome.
her. So.
That's really cute.
Okay,
Caleb, that's so
interesting.
cute.
You sound like my wife. Cute.
Because I said the word cute.
Get the
She
face,
says the word cute all
get
the
the
time.
face app out. We can make that happen.
She's
Boy.
As a photographer and videographer, I don't have a public-facing Instagram either.
Really?
Like I
What do you
have
mean
my
by that?
personal stuff that like as if
Oh, like you as a photographer.
yes, like a
Just
I
yeah.
don't have a professional account.
You could start one.
Yeah.
I could start it.
I'll be
It's
your
something I've
first-
always
I'll be your
wrestled with,
first,
but like
yeah,
person.
that anxiety of like putting something out there because it's not perfect and to the way I want it is so the labeling of myself
Delmar, the more he
myself
talks, the more he sounds like a
I
perfectionist,
know,
right?
I'm probably walking
I
myself
love that
backwards
Delmar,
into this.
A little bit.
If there's nothing else from this podcast, that Delmar's gone full circle of like.
I like it.
Well,
Welcome.
I'm learning more about
Welcome.
myself.
Well, that was my main like point to be in earlier. It's like you treat your own work like differently than you would like client work. I feel like you as a creator look at it differently. Like
Right. Well, you
that's-
don't have any. I mean, technically, you don't have any constraint.
Yeah.
And I think about with music stuff. Like, there's no constraint. It's self-imposed constraints, which have become important. I think I've learned that those are now like important things. Like, if you bring something over from like here, X website has to be done by this date. You know what I mean? And if I kind of take that idea of like. I guess what I've done with my own personal stuff, whether it's a website or a song, is kind of do that kind of thing of like, this has to be done by X. And then you walk away.
Yeah, I think when it comes to perfectionism, I'm making air quotes, there's a difference in what the meaning when it comes to like something that's super creative and conceptual as opposed to something that's more straightforward, say
Right.
like a piece of writing.
Right.
Because I believe that a creative concept can never be perfect. So that means a logo, a name, a tagline, any of that. So I'm never like, we need more time. We got to make this perfect. It's either good or it's bad, right?
Sure.
That's it for me. Could it be better? Sure. But when it comes to a piece of writing, say,
Yeah.
I do believe that there's a level that is quote unquote perfect.
Really?
I do, yeah.
So is that so? Going back to you talked about like the stuff that you had done for yourself, like the things that you had done fall in that category. Like you think that those could be perfect in some
No. The answer is no.
Okay.
But at the time,
At the time, yes. At the time, I spent hours and hours and hours reviewing them, of course.
You thought they were like, this is it, like gold
This is
star
it.
kind of thing. Interesting.
I wouldn't put it out to the world if it weren't, it's like my
Oh,
outfit.
for sure.
I wouldn't just wake up and throw something on. That's crazy. Come on.
That's true. Yeah, man.
but you haven't taken those down.
Well, I can't take most of them.
You don't. You
Wow.
don't
because
own
they're
them.
okay. So they're not
through
you
like
don't own
other
them.
outlets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, I feel that way about music stuff. Like, there's nothing I would have put out that I didn't believe in, but you can better believe there's songs I put out like 8 years ago that I'm like, this is horrifying.
Oh, man, I can only imagine.
Which should
It's
be
not
better
great.
than yesterday. Every day you're a little bit better than you were.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that.
previously, and so going back, I mean, I've been working here almost 2 years, and I think a lot of the presentations I've been involved in, I've been involved in mostly all of them. I feel like there's a lot of them where we as a team might think, they're perfect or pretty damn good, and like A, the client agrees with us, or B, they don't. And I think for a lot of that is what Caleb talked about, like, concept stuff, like design concept, logo concept, and where I think it's easier to be perfect is, like the writing stuff, because you have more time. I feel like a lot of times what does come back is like the client wants to use this word instead of that word, but that's just personal preference.
Sure.
There wasn't anything wrong that like we wrote or anything like that. It's just like, I want to use this word instead of this word because I think it's punchier. It's like, okay.
Agreed. But if
Okay,
it's
great.
consistent
Yeah.
stylistically and tonally, and it's grammatically correct and it's lacking spelling errors, tell me how it's not perfect.
Right.
Sure.
If it's not, like with creative headlines and it's not, we're not talking about a short story here. We're talking about this is what company A does, right?
Sure. I mean, I guess, to piggyback off that, but maybe take it a little bit step further, when you've presented something to a client, and this can go to either one of you, that you really do feel confident in, that like, this is a really good idea and this is going to hit the mark. And I feel strongly you developed it. You put a lot of like creative time into thinking on it, and they come back and say, this is absolutely not what I want. What's the recovery? How do you pivot from that? What mentally do you do to be like, all right, well, I guess I have to go back to the drawing board.
You want me to take this down?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's happened to me more times than I can count. Like, usually they don't like what I like, has been my experience.
Sure.
Or what we like at working at this agency and in prior experiences. So you just kind of like your skin just gets a little bit thicker every time, right?
I mean, it has to, right?
It
It's the only way you
has
can
to.
stay
Like,
in this.
Yeah.
They think we don't get it, and we think they don't get it, and somehow we always end up in the middle, right? Which is good. That's
Yeah,
a good
yeah.
thing.
Right. I've never had a client tell me that they see the final work and they go, "Oh, this is absolutely awful," and you need to start over from the beginning, because then if that is happening, you got to look back to the beginning and set expectations of where we're going to be and what it's going to be at the end.
Agreed.
But I've never had a problem with subjective criticism from a client coming back and saying like, "Oh, we want to use this font differently, or we want to use this shot in terms of this one." Like, that's just something that is maybe more of like a personal revision, or like something that doesn't fit for whatever reason for them. And like balancing that is.
But you've never had a hard pivot? You never really had someone come back and be like, we need to do this totally different?
Or
No.
even just a no on any concept. We used to pitch like 3 or 4 concepts, and they're like, no, we don't like any of these. And you're like, oh, wow, back to the drawing board.
Well, I think too, what's happened before is that, we delivered something that we thought was really good, and it was in line with what the client wanted. And once they see it, they're like, you did great. Seeing this visually or seeing this in writing, we want to pivot and do something else. So that's happened multiple times where it was like, we delivered what they wanted, and then we decide as a group that, now that it's done, maybe we need to pivot and go to something else. That's happened a lot. And I think that from like Ryan's perspective, I think we try to do a really good job as far as, when we take on a new like creative project, including photo and video, we try so hard in the beginning to nail down an objective and build like a strategy. From the strategy that will influence like the shot list or storyboard. So like there's constant approvals from the client through the whole process. So when they get that creative, it's like, oh, this is exactly what we talked about from day one.
Yeah, it shouldn't be unexpected.
Yeah, it shouldn't be unexpected.
Right.
And I think people get into trouble where like they just try to fly by the seat of their pants. Like they'll shoot something because they had this idea, never communicated with your team or with the client, and it's like the deliverer is like, oh, what the hell is this? It's like, I don't know. This is what I thought. But I think we don't do that, and I think we put processes in place that like would kind of like check and balance us to get the client what they want.
Agreed. I agree with all that, except, sometimes what you said happens.
Yeah.
We do everything that they said strategically. We create something that they wanted.
Sure.
And we show it to them, and they know, like, they're like, wow, well, yeah, you're right. We did say this, but seeing it is like, this isn't right. So it's like, sometimes you can't protect yourself from that. It just happens.
That's why there is no perfect. There is no perfect.
Mm-hmm. There's a perfect for Caleb. That's all I'm saying. And we're getting into
But
semantics
you haven't
on
found it yet,
perfectionism,
though, right? But you haven't found it. You think you will?
You said that earlier. We're all walking in circles here.
I said what earlier?
You said you'll never get to a level of you have your expectation of perfection,
I'll never get
but
there.
you'll never get there.
Yeah, I'll never get there. Yeah.
Do you feel like your quest for perfectionism? Do you feel like it annoys people? Like
Yes.
Okay. If you're like working,
certainly.
yeah.
Yeah.
I can name a few.
I could, yeah. Oh wow. I don't think it annoys you down there.
No, it does not.
Yeah, I think I could name some people that it annoys. I mean, because I put it onto the people that work for me too. So like, if you work for me, then I expect you to be at that level too, right? Yeah. So like, that's unfair. All right, and then that's the same goes for outside of professional. Let's talk about my friendships, right? Like I have an expectation, and if you don't hit it. Right, and I don't know if that's perfectionism. I'm unsure, but
I think it rolls into. But that all kind of coincides. You know what I mean? Like maybe not an expectation, but like a hope. You're like, please at least be at this level. No,
Yeah,
it's
right,
expectation.
It's an expectation. It's like, if I'm your friend and I'm doing all this, you need to be reciprocating in that regard. Otherwise, guess what, man? Look at Jared Threat. There's enough friends in the world. I can find another one.
True.
Dude's got a lot of friends, is all I'm saying.
That's true.
I think
Such
that
a
like
good guy.
I think in people's quest to perfection, if you look at like, taking music as an example, like let's say Michael Jackson, right? Notoriously huge perfectionist when it comes to music and performance and entertaining, right? Like, Quincy Jones put out a doc and it lists like how detail oriented he was with his backup dancers, his backup band, like to the minute detail of a song,
Right.
And the end result is great, right? Like he, one of the biggest catalogs ever. And then you look at some other artists who just like, I'm just gonna release it, who cares? And like they haven't reached the same result of that, but they still are very successful. So I think there's
Gucci
like,
Mane. Sorry.
like Drake. So there's like
No.
There's like two sides to that coin. I feel like both can be successful. It's like, a lot of times if we were to pitch something, you're normally battling the fact of like, either I'm going to get harsh feedback, if we do something that's not 100% to where we want it, and like when we present it, or the client might be upset that we might have taken a little bit longer to get it right. So it's like,
it's true.
Which one is the better?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's like, and maybe a lot of times too is like we might be stuck, on something, and it's like, well, let's put it in front of the client and get their feedback, because that might jar some ideas. It's like if we have an idea here in the office and we're trying to finalize it, and like we as a team may not agree 100% on it, we might put it in front of the client, get some feedback, and kind of finalize it from there. There's a lot of different approaches, but I feel like the best results out of anything comes some sort of like conflict to get to that perfect deliverable.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
There's been a ton of internal meetings where like, we're fighting, but not fighting, but we're arguing our point back and forth of why we like something, and we usually come out of it with a better idea that wasn't part of the original.
Right. And at the end, the client gets a better product.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And if it does take us a little bit more time, but they get something that was maybe better than what they were even expecting in the first place, is that not, But I think it probably also matters about the subject matter, like what the deliverable is too, right? I would say that maybe some things have a harder line of like requiring perfectionism than other things. If you're talking about like a social media post versus a logo
Or a menu.
Yeah.
It's going to be out there for a while, and it's in front of a lot of eyes.
Right. Exactly. You talk about those kind of things. I feel like there's got to be maybe internal metrics that go with that of like, well, this logo is going to brand this company for, at least the next couple of years. You know what I mean? Once you're talking about years versus a day versus a month, you know what I mean? Right? Like,
Well, a logo can evolve, right? It can evolve.
but less frequently than like social media updates would go, or,
Yeah, that might be like how many logos did they have to get to that one though?
Yeah.
Like you had to go through a lot of failures and maybe revisions or whatever to get to that certain logo, to get to the quote perfect one.
I'd love to know too, from the agencies that designed those quote perfect ones, if like the one that was used is their favorite.
Yeah, that is a very good point.
Like I always have wanted to do like a blog post showcasing like our favorite work that
Never made it.
Never made it, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's so much legal stuff in that, right? Because it's for other people.
Right.
But typically when it comes to logos and names and taglines, they don't always pick the one that's my favorite. That's okay.
Right.
I like all the ones I present. I never present something I don't like. Unless my boss says, you have to do this.
Have you been in that position before?
What position?
Like where you've had to present something that you didn't feel like 100% on?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm just going to answer it honestly. That's the truth. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean,
how do you get through like, because you say like, when you have to go to a meeting and you have to give like the confidence behind that kind of stuff. But if you don't have the confidence, you just try to
I don't
muster
present
up?
it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Like, so I won't be the one presenting that idea if I don't have the confidence, because, and I've straight up said that to a superior. Like, if we're going to present this, I can't be the person talking because I don't feel confident about it.
Wow. Okay. I respect that.
Yeah, and I think I've been in some meetings where we're completely honest. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, this was an option. Didn't really love it, but we wanted to give you kind of some options to kind of go along with the ones that we do love. And sometimes they'll agree, like, oh, we don't like this one either. But sometimes it's like, oh, I kind of like it. And then it's like, cool, like, let's take this and let's evolve it then. Because like we, at the end of the day,
We're here for them.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're not
That's
an art
important.
studio.
Yes, and that's the important thing to remember, I think, with client stuff. But it's also hard because when you're a creative person, and especially if you identify yourself as a perfectionist, or if you don't, even though you might secretly be.
Whatever.
But it makes it hard. You know what I mean? When you think you've nailed it, or you think you know exactly what this thing should be, and then it kind of, in your maybe perspective, gets distorted along the way. But at the end of the day, we're not here for our own.
Yeah. For me, when it comes to clients, if they're happy, it's perfect.
Fair.
Right? Like, we've
Absolutely
had situations where clients have given us some tough feedback, right? And people were, upset about it.
Sure.
And I get it, but my response is always, we're not here to develop art. We develop advertising, which is art in many respects.
For sure.
But we're getting paid for it.
Yeah.
By a company. So we need to make them happy,
true.
right? It's not what we think is best. It's what they think is best.
Yes.
With our gentle persuasion.
Of course.
Very true.
But they're hiring you because of the previous work that you thought was something that was.
But at the end of the day, you can't keep pushing them and telling them it's this, it's this, it's this when they want that.
Right.
Because they'll
true.
leave.
That's true.
I agree with you. I just wanted to be, pushing you a little bit.
Guys just
Difficult,
firing shots
yeah.
at each other a little bit.
Yeah.
This podcast.
Yeah.
Shooters got to shoot, man.
Shooters gotta shoot. All right, guys. Well, I think that's pretty good. I think we covered a lot of ground in that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
This was nice.
I found myself.
Wasn't perfect. It was
I
good.
found myself at the end of this podcast, I think.
Found yourself as a perfectionist.
Yeah, no, I am.
Ryan, are you gonna start
We
your
got to the end.
perfectionist photographer's Instagram now?
Maybe. I don't know. It's something I'm struggling with. There's some anxiety behind it, Like,
What kind of shots would
putting
you have
yourself
on
out? You know
You
what
were
I mean?
you are a total perfectionist, bro, in many ways. That's how it sounds to me.
Yeah.
But you just have the ability to kind of like maybe disassociate. Like, this is a professional thing that I'm doing for someone else versus the thing that you would do for yourself.
Right.
I think anyone that has a creative thing, like, you have your metric for what you do for yourself.
For sure.
That's important.
Yeah.
Got to have that. Mm-hmm. And it should bleed a little bit, obviously, into your professionalism too.
Just cool. I'm a cool cat, man.
All right, thank you guys so much for listening to the episode. We really hope you enjoy it, and stick around and come back for the next one.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate everyone kind of giving us their time on this platform. Please stay up to date with us. Follow us on Instagram at Mr. Smith Agency. Check out all of our work there. Also, visit our website, mrsmith.agency.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.